Overwhelm comes when we tell ourselves everything that we're doing has equal importance. All things must be accomplished. There's nothing that we can chop off our list. Some people say overwhelm comes when we face dramatic new situations and we don't have the emotional toolkit to deal with it. Keep watching in this video, and what I'm going to do is debunk that second option. I'm going to support the first one, use a really cool example of Jesus in the New Testament that dealt with an overwhelming situation, and then round off the video by giving you a couple of great ways to deal with overwhelm when you experience it. Hi, my name is Shawn Sommerkamp, and this is Motivationeer Christian Coaching. I post 2 videos a week, so please like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you can be reminded when I do. Please also consider becoming a member at Motivationeer.com. Your membership really supports this channel. Thank you. There's a scene in the book of Matthew, chapter 19, where a rich young man comes to Jesus and says, "What can I do to be saved?" And Jesus tells him, "Give up everything you have and follow me, and then you'll have, eternal life." He walks away sad. The scene I want to focus on is what he does right after that. He turns to his disciples and says, "It is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich person to enter into heaven." In that moment, it describes the disciples as being greatly astonished, and they ask the question, who then can be saved? Now, I don't pretend to be a Greek linguist or a Greek scholar. Obviously, I'm not. I do a lot of research where I can compare Greek and English translations in ancient Greek, like Strong's Concordance, the Blue Letter Bible, etc. And I looked into that word astonished to discover what it meant. And it's very interesting what I found. In the original Greek, that word astonish meant to be struck with panic and shock. Being astonished means being struck with panic and shock. I think it's safe to say that we can consider the disciples in this moment as being overwhelmed. They couldn't grasp how they themselves could be saved. If you read that little story, you'll see kind of the rabbit hole they go down and Jesus supporting them in it. But in that moment, when they asked Jesus this question, they couldn't fathom how they could be saved. They started considering the options and all things came back as it's impossible. They, in that moment, like we do today, when we hear something that is really drastic or dramatic, we instantly and automatically in our brains search for an answer to this puzzle. Their minds and our minds quickly explore all available past experiences that might lend a hand in this new current revelation. And when their brains couldn't find an answer to it, they concluded this is impossible. Finding an answer from this newly revealed truth from Jesus, this new supremely important truth, being saved, their minds registered that to find the answer would require a huge amount of time, energy, and devotion to find the answer, which meant in order to achieve the answer, it would have to instantly become the most important thing that they were doing in their life in that moment. And we can assume their brains operate just like ours do today, in that they kind of instantly calculated in that instant of new discovery an unknown value. They didn't know how much time it was going to take to discover this incredibly important new answer. They naturally then took all of their current and existing obligations and added this new infinite unknown time allotment to it. That is what caused the panic and shock, that overwhelmed feeling. Their inability to see how they could do everything together. All their current stuff plus this big, huge new time commitment. Everything had to become equally important in their minds. This massive new time burden, time commitment, being unknown and therefore infinite in scope, would now have to somehow be able to get squeezed into their existing life. I know that this is an incredibly complex concept, so I want to use an example from maybe a modern day career situation to help explain it a little bit more clearly. Let's pretend you're in a role where you have a lot of big responsibility, a lot of employees reporting to you, and one day you get an email from your boss that says, "Hey, we didn't hit our Q3 numbers. In fact, we only got 70% of the way there. We fell short by 30%. In Q4, we have to make up for that Q3 shortfall and cover our Q4 quota, or we're gonna have to fire a bunch of people." This is not an uncommon scenario. It happens quite a bit. Someone watching may know that I'm taking an example exactly from your current situation. And what happens in that moment is instant overwhelm. We get struck with shock and panic, astonishment. Why? Because our brains instantly in that moment start searching for previous patterns we can fall back on, pull forward into the future, rely on to come up with a way to get this new big thing done. We possibly consider in that moment the scene of having to fire a bunch of employees. More likely than not, the internal dialogue might be something like, wow, we almost killed ourselves to get to our Q3 results, and that was only 70% of the way there. Now we're going to have to work even harder in Q4 to make up for that missing 30%, all during the holidays, Thanksgiving and Christmas. This is impossible. I'm going to get fired, or I'm going to have to fire a bunch of people. It's because our brains race through a ton of scenarios, as many as we can conjure in those first few seconds, which is many, by the way, and we come up empty-handed and we panic. I personally think, and I want to make a unique correlation here, this is why so many people kind of resonate with that one scene in Avengers Infinity War with Doctor Strange. You probably remember the scene. It gets talked about all the time, where a few of the Avengers go to Thanos' home planet, Doctor Strange being one of them, and they start battling Thanos, who is really getting the upper hand. So Doctor Strange kind of floats, off the battlefield using the time stone, propels himself into the future, and starts examining possible ways that they can have a victory. He goes through 14,605 or 650
14,605
different timelines before he can come up with one possible way of winning.
How many did we win? One.
This is what we do. This is why that scene resonates with us so much. Our brains kind of go through that flickering search for, answers in the future. Now, of course, we wish we could use a time stone and try them all out and then come back and implement the one that worked. We can't, but that's why we like that scene, because our brains kind of go that way anyways. This overwhelm comes because we tell ourselves everything we've already been doing in the past. Now this extra huge burden of what we're gonna have to do in Q4, we have to add to our plate. This is impossible. There is no scenario in the future where I could be successful here. I'm doomed, or a bunch of my employees are doomed, which means ultimately I kind of always come back to this. It's our thinking. That overwhelm comes from what we're telling ourselves about the situation, not the situation itself. Overwhelm does not come because we're not perfectly equipped emotionally to deal with this new set of information. If everything on our plate could be immediately taken away and we could spend every waking second on just this one new situation, we'd be fine. We have the equipment to deal with that, but we tell ourselves all things are equally important and everything has to be done. The old stuff and the new. That internal dialogue is what creates that instant panic, the shock, the overwhelm, the astonishment. I can't help but say this is why James T. Kirk rigged the test, the Kobayashi Maru, that new captains had to take in the Starfleet.
Should we, fire back?
No.
Of course not.
Armed photons, prepare to fire on the Klingon warbirds.
Yes, sir.
That test was designed to put ship captains in an unwinnable situation to watch how they handled panic. So he hacked the system, rigged the test so that he could win. Why?
I don't believe in the no-win scenario.
Because he basically was saying, that's so unreasonable. There's always a way out. There's always a new prioritization. There's always something we could do. And he hacked the test. Yep, I just did a video with a Avengers and Star Trek reference. Awesome. This is psychologically the same dilemma known in social psychology as the trolley experiment. I can't go through that right now. Maybe you've heard of it. If you haven't, maybe even if you have, please look it up. It's a really great read. It's very fascinating, where you have, an unwinnable situation that you're in and you have to make a moral choice. So what do? We have this overwhelm that washes over us. How can we handle it? The best place to start is to see what Jesus told those disciples when they asked him that question, when they were overwhelmed and said, this is impossible. No way, Jesus. What are we supposed to do? Well, in Matthew chapter 19, verse 26, Jesus tells them this: with man, this is impossible, but with God, all things are possible. Isn't that beautiful? We get to focus our attention on God in that moment. He knows all potential scenarios that would bring about a victory in the future. And by putting all of our focus and attention on him in that moment, we are not focused on the negative thinking, that spiraling, overwhelmed thinking. We're in a sense casting our anxiety upon him, which is what Peter tells us in 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 7. When we are doing this, we are choosing deliberately not to engage in the negative self-talk. There is a way. God knows the way. God knows all the ways. And surrendering to his plan as we watch his plan unfold is the perfect start. Then, as the next step, I want you to take on another very important truth. We can prioritize all tasks based on the company's goals. Ultimately, if a company is not making money, the doors will not stay open. When push comes to shove, everything comes down to something tied to revenue producing activities, something that improves the bottom line. Really, that is a guiding principle in business. It's not heartless, it's not emotionless. Yes, of course, if your employee is going through a life crisis, you want to focus on that. Yes, of course. I am saying though, take on this new truth that your brain can instantly plug in. Hey, the business keeping its doors open, that's the priority. Let me focus on what is attached to the numbers, the bottom line, the things that keep the doors open. So we can ask ourselves the question, which is always a good question to ask, based on the goals of the company, what's the next step that I can take in this situation? When we ask ourselves that kind of an open-ended question, we are basically activating our right hemisphere. We start to get creative instantly. And as you've probably already figured out, we're no longer focused on the negative thinking, the stuff that's making us spiral downward, because we've asked ourselves a creative question. And when we do this, we tell ourselves the new thought, everything cannot be equally the same. There are things really are that are priority. And when we do that, the overwhelmed feeling goes away. So start off by saying a prayer, casting our anxieties upon God, asking him for wisdom, surrendering to his way because he knows the way. Then trusting that to keep the business open, we can prioritize focused on things that do respond to the bottom line. If people are involved and it's really a crisis of someone's life or someone's livelihood, let's pay attention to that. But we also can say, yep, the business needs to stay open. That's what I'm going to focus on. This is how to deal with the situation when you're feeling overwhelmed. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe for 2 new videos each week. Tell me in the comments below about your career situation and I'll make a video for you with a shout out. You can also become a member at Motivationeer.com. Your career is not just a way to make a living, it's a way to transform the world.